The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Zhu with the U.S. Department of Energy's Better Buildings Initiative. I'd like to welcome you to the October edition of the Better Buildings webinar series. In this series, we profile the best practices of Better Buildings Alliance partners and other organizations working to improve energy and water efficiency across buildings and manufacturing spaces in America. Next slide, please. Today, we are excited to focus this webinar solely on water efficiency. Water plays an important role in operating our buildings and manufacturing spaces. Many of you are familiar with the energy-water nexus, where reducing water use also saves on energy costs. Many of our Better Buildings Challenge partners have set portfolio-wide water consumption goals on top of their 20% energy savings goals. You can find water efficiency solutions and resources on our Better Buildings Solutions Center. First, we'll hear from Rivion, a sustainability and energy consulting group, who will describe new opportunities to benchmark water use and data to analyze consumption. Next, we'll hear from Tower Companies, a Better Buildings Challenge commercial real estate partner, who will talk about the strategies they employ to achieve their Better Buildings Challenge water goal of 20% across their portfolio. Finally, we'll hear from BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association, on a new challenge they have for commercial properties to benchmark and reduce water and waste and get recognition for doing so. So let me introduce our presenters today. Panelist number one, Ridolfi, is the Director of Project Operations for Rivion. Since 2009, he's worked on a wide range of new construction and existing building project types for over 30 million square feet of real estate. He oversees the core operations of Rivion's talented building consultants, energy engineers, and commissioning agents, assisting with sales and project scope development and implementation, helping discover and obtain untapped value for clients. Our second panelist today is Jonathan Bauer from the Tower Companies. As the Tower Companies sustainability analyst, Jonathan is responsible for furthering sustainability and energy efficiency across Tower's portfolio. He manages several efforts, including compliance with energy benchmarking laws, annual greenhouse gas inventory reporting, Tower's energy, water, and waste management program, and engaging tenants and Tower staff to promote sustainability best practices. Tower Companies is a Better Buildings Challenge energy and water goal achiever. Our third panelist is Ken Rosenfeld from the Building Owners and Managers Association, BOMA. Ken is the Director of State and Local Affairs and leading professional association advancing a vibrant commercial real estate industry. In this position, Ken works with BOMA local associations and state coalitions to support their advocacy efforts in state legislatures and city halls across the country. He directs the BOMA W2 Challenge, a groundbreaking initiative to support the real estate sector in benchmarking water consumption and waste output and improving performance. Thanks to all of you for being with us today. Before we get started with our presentations, I want to remind our audience that we will hold questions until near the end of the hour. Please send in any questions you have for our speakers or any general questions through the chat box on your webinar screen throughout the session today, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. The session will be archived and posted to the web for your reference. So to get us started, let's kick it off to Rock from Rivion. Next slide, please.
All right, thank you. And we can actually keep it going to the next slide. All right, so thank you, Cindy, for that kind of introduction. We're here to talk about water. So since we're doing this over a webinar, I can't show you how excited I am to talk about water and not talk about energy for once. So just imagine yourself riding this wave to a more water efficient future. So a little bit about Rivion. You can see we do all sorts of things in building operations, and one of those things is focusing on water consumption and primarily how to improve that in the built environment in all buildings types. So I'm excited that you're listening to this topic today, and one that I find myself continuing to be more and more immersed on, and more excited to talk about. So one of the things that we're going to talk about here today is benchmarking, and specifically how to manage water in your buildings. Fortunately, there are a lot of great organizations out there that keep popping up too, different associations that are paying attention to how water is consumed and have many resources to help guide your way through this effort. I'm here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the fresh coast of Lake Michigan, and we get to regularly participate in a lot of local water events happening here in the state of Wisconsin. Next slide, please. All right, again, to get everyone more fired up about water and why we can't waste it, I'm sure many of you have driven down water-soaked roads like this, just from poor sprinkler design usage or just old systems that aren't properly functioning, whether it's poor maintenance or something. Well, this I took a couple months ago, and I'm still waiting for a call back from my local government to talk about how we can improve on this water waste. So I don't like seeing this at all, whether or not it's my tax dollars. This is just frustrating, and this is one of the reasons I do what I do and enjoy doing, to find opportunities to improve and ultimately save money. But really, that's for a different soapbox story, so I'll move on for now. Next slide, please. All right, so why are we really here and talking about water? Well, really, we just simply don't want to waste it. We want to know what we're doing, have a plan, and how to act on it. So I'm sure several of you remember an old children's show, Dinosaur, called Barney, and Barney's good old instructions of never let the water run. Well, again, 25 years later or so, I'm leaving messages for my city staff to ask them to do the same thing. Don't let the water run like that on that sprinkler-soaked road. It's just not necessary. That brings into more questions of, okay, well, what landscaping was selected? But again, there's all different tangents that we can go down and talking about water consumption in buildings or for cities. But these are the same types of water waste issues that face buildings and around the country and around the world, really. And these are all just opportunities that I see. And these are all the water-centric operational points that can actually be easily managed. If you have a plan, if you have a goal, you can start working towards those. So I'm sure each of you could share many stories on what has caused water issues in your buildings, the different reasonings for why you don't necessarily manage water to the point that you potentially could. But that's where, again, organizations like the Better Buildings program and the challenges that they put out there can help assist. They provide the resources to help guide those things. So from a management perspective overall, we must first understand how water is used in our facilities. Before we get into that, though, we'll start with some basic benchmarking objectives. Next slide, please. So water benchmarking basics. I'm sure we have a large group that are listening in today that haven't necessarily benchmarked their water consumption for their buildings, or maybe they are benchmarking one of the meters in their building, but not all of them. Potentially if there's a sub-meter for cooling towers or for irrigation, there's just one main meter that they focus on, and that's really all that they care about or focus their attention on from a day-to-day or month-to-month basis. And that's okay, and I'm happy that you're listening in today to learn of other opportunities that we can talk about. So whether it is an issue of the frequency of the water utility bills, I know like my house, I get quarterly bills. I would love for that to be more frequent, but I know that, what my quarterly will be every, throughout the year. It really doesn't fluctuate because I don't irrigate, so my usage is pretty consistent. But buildings, I mean, that's a whole different story. You have companies leasing, moving in and out that can all change that usage pattern. And it's important to understand, why and how that frequency or that usage may change throughout the year. So there's programs like Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Their platform is fairly easy to use. It's been improving year over year, so there's a lot of opportunities there. And I just certainly encourage you to use programs like that are free and are readily available. Other programs that you can get involved with are, you'll hear from Ken later on for the BOMA's W2. Those are great programs, again, that can focus your attention on where to improve and how to improve. And they provide the resources and the support to ask questions and to inquire about ways that you may not have thought of for improving. These organizations also provide the recognition, whether it's there's programs like Rivion's drop program, or like BOMA's W2, like LEAD, or any number of the other programs out there that are a great opportunity. Next slide, please. So ultimately, benchmarking can be easy. Again, think of a typical home, maybe one main meter. You get a utility bill, like mine quarterly. Utility bills for larger buildings and even cities or more suburban rural areas, those may be 1, 2, 3, 4 meters, and that can be quite difficult. Like, next slide, please. Like this. This is what we often see when we get involved in a building and try to figure out where and how to benchmark water. You have city building main meters, you have irrigation sub-meters that are tenant owned, you have other building sub-meters that are owned by the building owner, you have other tenant main meters that are actually owned by the utility, you have irrigation meters that are owned by the utility, and you can also have cooling tower sub-meters, and every single one of those could have a different unit of measure for tracking water consumption, and that is a nightmare to manage. I'll definitely admit it, because we have to do that on several of the clients that we work with. So the best news is, once it's figured out, it's very, very easy to manage, and it's just simply collecting the data, whether it's from the utility bill, going to the water meters to read them. Now I know there's going to be different circumstances where a water meter can only be accessed from a tall step ladder or something, and is very inconvenient to read on a regular basis. So maybe those are the ones you pay attention to a little bit less frequently. You're still looking at them, at least quarterly, or there's automated technology to provide those meter readings directly to a computer or an email or to a cell phone. But again, the important thing is to figure it out early and learn to manage that moving forward. Next slide, please. So one of the programs that internally that we had created to help us kind of better understand, how buildings are using water is using a program called DROP. Basically, it's a 1 to 100 rating system for ranking buildings on their water consumption. Its initial focus was for commercial office buildings, but the intent and the basics can really be applied to several building types. Excuse me, all documented in using Energy Star Portfolio Manager as the main tracking and database tool. They have a lot of good inputs there and a lot of good reporting capabilities that we can download and use to really put together some great calculations to identify what the anticipated water usage is going to be. So that uses things like gross square footage, location, so zip code for weather data, tracking heating and cooling degree days, weekly operating hours, so is it 50 hours a week that the building is being used or 60 hours a week, the number of workers on the main shift. Essentially, it's all the main inputs for a commercial office building to get a Energy Star rating of 1 to 100. So again, trying to maintain that consistency amongst all of the different platforms and really narrowing down the key factors to what's typical. And then really getting into a bit more with the water utility meters, understanding if it's a utility bill that you're going to use or if it's a manual reading that you have to take once a month. You can add that to a preventive maintenance program. It's just a basic reminder saying, hey, just go check out this sub-meter, go check out that irrigation meter or that cooling tower, makeup or blowdown meters. And those are important things. Again, once you understand what the units are, how to read those, the initial setup is the important part, and it's relatively easy from there. Irrigation area with tools like Google Earth or Google Maps, and there's plenty of other tools out there that are available for just doing quick markups on your site. Landscape contractors may have that information as well, because they're not going to be necessarily charging you for irrigating your parking lots, unless you're like my city government, and I'm sure we're getting charged for irrigating our roads, but that's for a different argument again. Next slide, please. So why? What's really the value in all this, time and effort that may be necessary to get this benchmarked and set up initially? Well, that question is kind of goes off in a couple different ways. It's one, understanding that the true cost of water is still not typically billed. Really what we're paying for is the infrastructure to deliver that water, to clean and deliver the water to our door. We're not paying for the water itself. So there will come a time when we will start paying for that water. I mean, we're starting to see it in some of the more coastal regions. I mean, even 15 miles west of myself in Milwaukee, they're having to run major piping and all that stuff, and they're having issues with whether they use well water or Lake Michigan water, and there's a lot of issues that are going to come into play building upon that infrastructure issue. Costs are increasing. We still see that in utility bills on a regular basis. I know Jonathan will share some information on that that's very interesting, and again proves the reason and the value of paying attention to this stuff now. It's important to understand what that expected use is versus actual water use for your building. For your per occupant count basis, all of those types of things can play a factor into how you manage your building going forward. Are you adding a new tenant with 100 different occupants? Okay, that usage, is that usage taking place of a former tenant that used the same amount of square footage but only had 50 occupants in there? Obviously, those usages are going to be different, and it's important to understand and at least be able to back up and support any increases in your operating budget, or to justify, well, this is why we've had such a significant drop. So I'd urge you to, again, check out, WaterSense and EPA's 1 to 100 water score for multifamily buildings. Even if you don't have a multifamily building, the math and the intent is very important, can be leveraged within any one building, no matter the building type. Also, LEED's newest rating system, they do a better job of ranking water for what and against bills being entered into the program on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So what can you do? You can take action. You can focus on basic indoor water usage or outdoor water usage areas, depending on when you get your benchmarking set up. Where do you want to focus your attention? Again, plan something, set a goal. Do you want to reduce your outdoor water usage because you feel like you're irrigating way too much area? I mean, we've gone into facilities, did a analysis of the plantings that they had, the landscaping that they had, and they had originally selected all native plants that did not need to be watered on a regular basis. The local weather and rain patterns that they had were sufficient. So we were able to basically remove or abandon in place an entire, couple acres of irrigation. Now, granted, they shouldn't have been irrigating to that many acres to begin with, but again, a different soapbox story. So here's some just quick opportunities for improving your building. These are some low, no-cost things or relatively inexpensive things to do. Next slide, please. So finally, you really just need to keep it simple. Water is simple to manage. You just need to have a plan and set a goal. You can become your organization's water star. You want to take an effort, put something in place, say, I'm going to achieve this, and start putting in a plan and acting on that plan to build and to achieve those goals. Start by identifying the water meters, ask questions, say, can I get access to these? If you're a facilities engineer and you don't see your utility bills, ask the accounting department to see a copy of them. Have them forwarded on so that you know exactly what you're managing. And that's part of the issue, is just that communication. Enter the data into Portfolio Manager. It's just a more fancy spreadsheet, really, or Excel spreadsheet. So if you can enter it there, you can enter it into Portfolio Manager. Join a support program like Better Building. So it's great that you're participating in something like this. Join BOMA, ask tower companies and Jonathan questions. What did you do? How did you do it? How did you get the buy-in from upper management to support your things? And then simply ask yourself, what are you going to do? Sorry, I had to end this with a little water joke there, if you got that. So again, thank you for listening today. I hope you all have something, at least one thing to take away, and do go back to your facilities and to start benchmarking and managing your water more so. Thank you, and back over to you, Cindy.
Thanks, Rock. What are you going to do? I love it. For everyone listening online, we'll share links for some of the water resources that Rock mentioned towards the end of the webinar. Now let's hear from a Better Buildings Challenge goal achiever that has had success tracking and reducing water across their portfolio of buildings. Jonathan, tell us what Tower Companies has been doing. Next slide.
Thanks so much, Cindy, and then to the entire DOE team really for putting on this webinar and the whole series. They're always great to tune into. And thanks to the ReTech team as well for helping out and coordinating. And to you, Rock, for leading us off and always being a rock star. I appreciate that. So I'm going to talk today about a couple of things and get into some of the weeds on some of the things Rock was talking about. But I want to start with a brief intro of Tower. So if we move to the next slide, I'll start there. So the Tower Companies is a owner, manager, and developer of real estate in the Washington, D.C. area. We're a local company, privately held, family owned. And the reason I mention that is because it impacts the way we not only do business, but the way we do sustainability. And because we build our buildings, we don't buy them. Because we hold our buildings, we don't sell them. We're able to do some interesting things that a lot of other real estate companies might not be able to do. And so I always like to caveat everything I talk about with that. But we've been working in sustainable development for decades now before LEED, and I know our owners pride themselves a lot in that at our buildings, and we have support from the top and senior management, and that's something that's really, really important, but it just doesn't come like that overnight. You have to work for it, so I'll talk a little bit more about how we make the business case for these things. Next slide, please. And just a little bit more quickly about our commitment to sustainability. Everyone probably has seen a lot of these logos before, but over 90% of our portfolio is LEED and Energy Star certified. More recently, we became a Fitwel champion, which just means we're committed to applying the health and wellness Fitwel standard across our portfolio. And we certified the first apartment building in the world with that standard just this year, so that's pretty exciting. The climate registry is where we track and report our greenhouse gas inventory every single year, and we use that data then to set goals and improve. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about Green Lease Leaders later, but basically it's a standard that gives us recognition for including sustainability in the lease, which is really vital to a lot of energy efficiency and water efficiency topics, but I'll touch more on that later. So next slide, please. And here, I won't spend much time, but it's just an example snapshot of a bunch of the awesome things we've been able to achieve over the years since 2010. We've saved a whole bunch of electricity, almost 100 million gallons of water, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, we compost, we have waste goals, and so along the side, you'll see Better Buildings Challenge goal, and then our 70% by 2020 landfill diversion goal. But I'll talk a little bit more about Better Buildings Challenge if you move to the next slide, please. So back in 2013, Tower joined the Better Buildings Challenge officially, and we used a 2010 baseline for our commitment. And as everyone knows, the goal there is 20% reduction in energy and water by 2020. We were lucky enough to achieve that energy goal in 2016 in just 3 years, and then the water goal the year after in 2017, we went over 20% there as well. And so the Better Buildings program, if you're not involved in it already, we would highly recommend it. It's a great place to learn from your peers, because that's really one of the first places we go when we're interested in finding, ways to save energy and water. It's a great collection of peers. And then there's also so many resources you can take advantage of, and the whole team is just awesome to work with and help you along the way. So I'd highly recommend that program. Next slide, please. And I know that this is a webinar about water, but I want to talk really quickly about energy, and I'm glad Cindy kind of mentioned the energy-water nexus in the beginning because it is a real thing and we like to talk about it. But really quick, here's our energy progress since 2010. And what this chart's showing you, that blue line there is raw kBTU energy usage, so that's natural gas and electricity put together in a nice metric, and it shows you the raw decrease that we've seen since 2010 working on energy efficiency. It's a pretty dramatic drop. And then along the right side, that dollars there, that green line, represents the cumulative dollars we have saved compared to 2010 each year. And so when you add that up, through 2017, it's almost $13 million we've saved on the energy side in just that short period of time. And then you'll see along the left-hand side here some of the strategies and things we've done to save that energy. And a lot of it's things that Rock hit on in the beginning. It's all about benchmarking and setting goals. There's standards you should align with and follow and pull best practices from. There's, obviously the retrofits and different projects you need to work on, and it gets more complicated and a little bit more advanced with real-time energy management and green leasing and tenant engagement and all these other things, renewable energy, that you really should consider doing if you want to see these big reductions. But just at a high level, wanted to share some of those practices. But if you go to the next slide, I'll talk more about water. So that energy chart looks really great, but then when you go over to water and we run the same calculations we did, the chart looks a little bit different. So I'll just explain what you're looking at here. The bars there on the chart are, again, raw water consumption in kilogallons across our Better Buildings Challenge portfolio. And you see that there's a reduction there over the years, a little blips here and there kind of the last few years, but pretty much a reduction. And then when you look at that line, that represents annual water cost each year. And so if it was the energy chart, we would have loved to see this decrease the same way, but it didn't. And there's a few reasons for that I just wanted to kind of explain. And it's different kind of depending on where you are in the country and water costs and things, but this is what we're experiencing here in the DC metro area. So water is really different. One of the biggest reasons is it's not a deregulated market like energy is. You can't procure low water rates and lock them in for years. It's just not an option. And so what we're seeing is the water costs getting passed on, a lot of it infrastructure related, as Rock mentioned, has practically doubled since 2010 when you look at the water rates. And so there's no way, no matter how much water we save, we're not going to be able to show a dollar savings at the end of the year because of the way that the cost of water for us is increasing. That doesn't mean water efficiency is not important. It's just important to know that because you have to make a slightly different business case than you would for, say, a lighting retrofit. And so how we do that is we think of it in terms of cost avoidance. And so that's the biggest business case here for water efficiency. So really, the way we look at it is it's the only hedge we have against increasing water costs. If we can do water efficiency and do it really well, we can at least hedge that increase in cost, even if we're not showing the best ROI at the end of the year every single time. But let me just paint a picture here, again, to kind of show the business case and how we present this to senior leadership and the owners of the company. So if you were to imagine there in 2010, if our water usage stayed flat through 2017, right? So if you look at that bar very far on the left, it's almost 70,000 kilogallons. Imagine it read 70,000 all the way across to 2017. If we didn't participate in water efficiency or seek opportunities to reduce water and that stayed flat, it would have cost us about $700,000 across through to 2017. So basically that's the entire amount we spent in a single year. And so when you take that and you bring it to your leadership and you say, hey, yeah, we're not be able to show you at the end of the year that we used less than we did back in 2010, like we can for energy, but we're still saving money if you look at it in a slightly different way. And that's been a pretty good pitch for us. Next slide, please. And again, as kind of with energy, here are some of the strategies we've used to achieve those water reductions. And so again, similar things, benchmarking, goal setting, guidelines. We've used LEED over the years a lot, but there's a lot of other ones out there too you can take a look at. Green leasing, which I'll get into, real-time energy monitoring, and more recently looking at real-time water monitoring, which has its own challenges, but something that we're taking a look at. So next slide, please, and I'll jump in a little deeper. So here's what I'll talk about a little bit more: real-time water monitoring, some technology, metering, and then green leasing. Next slide, please. So here's a snapshot of our real-time water monitoring program as it exists right now. We're currently in a pilot phase with a company called Mach Energy, who has our real-time energy management platform right now. And so this is the first building we put on with water. So what you're looking at here, this green band is an expected water profile created by our software. It looks at all similar weather days in the past few years, and it creates an expected profile based on how our building operated on those days and says you should probably fall within this range. So then it gives our engineering team and management team a goal and an idea of what every day they should be tracking towards. And they have dashboards on their computers, apps on their phone, where they can look at this in a real 15-minute intervals to see kind of how they're stacking up. And that's exactly what that blue line through the middle is. That's the actual water consumption in real time for that day. And so this is a good optimized water profile. Optimized really would be a little bit below that green band, but this is a good profile. Nothing crazy in the day. This is what we would have expected. So it's a good way for us to level set and understand how we're using water that day. Next slide, please. Here is another picture, similar chart, but you can see water use is a little bit higher this day. So this would be a really good signal for me to go back to our team when we have monthly and quarterly meetings with the engineers and say, hey, what happened on this day? Can we identify, something that would have caused this high water usage? Our platform also has a notes section where they can leave notes every day so they don't forget what happened. They might have left a note on this day that said something happened or some equipment was working differently or they had a lot of people in the building that day or whatever it might be to explain it. But it's a good, again, this tool helps us kind of detect that and keep track of it and learn. Next slide, please. And then here's a quick example of just a peak day where there's a big water peak there. So that's another big flag. We'll go in and say, hey, what happened during this, 2-hour time period? Were you doing some maintenance or was something happening at the building? We'll just kind of dig in and have the engineers tell us what's going on and see if we can save water next time around. Next slide. And last, again, just a quick example of how we use the program so far. We're looking at weekends and holidays all the time, and you would assume that the profile should look like this. It should be pretty flat. It's completely flat because no one should be in the building, or if there's anything running, it should be very minimal. So this is a perfect day, executed holiday or weekend day, and it's an example of what we're looking for. If there's a big spike, we would kind of go in and ask questions and see if there were tenants in the building or what have you. Next slide, please. All right, jumping into the next thing, I'm going to kind of push through to make up on time here. So I want to talk a little about water metering because it's a big topic and it's really important. You can't have any of the data and visualization that I just showed you without considering your different water metering options. And there are many, and they cost from little to a lot. It just depends on what you need to do or what you want to do, or how much data you need, and et cetera. So I'll just jump in. The first thing you can do is you can use existing infrastructure, right? So in a perfect world, you have a smart water meter, which is most common on the water meter side as it is on the electric side or gas side. But if you had pulse outputs coming off your utility meter, ideally you could just connect to that and put it into your energy management system, and it should be a pretty easy 1-2 connection. Alternatively, you can do a little bit of a hybrid model, which we've experimented with a little bit, where there's certain meters technologies out there, a lot of them less than $1,000 a piece, where you can take a device and, for lack of a better term, you can kind of hijack your utility meter, plug a wire in, the utility's fine with it, don't worry about it, and you can take the data directly from the utility meter reading, just kind of mimic it and shoot that into your energy management system, which is always a good option if you have that access. Sometimes utility meters are in manholes in the street and you can't get there, and that makes it challenging, but then you might want to look at other options. So you could add a new meter, which is the pictures we have here, where essentially we found a straight piece of the pipe on the property side of the meter of the water line, and we cut into it, put a meter in, shut the building down for an hour or 2 or 3 while they were doing the work. And then the picture here in the middle I have is where that meter connects into a box, and we have a little signal with a radio that then transmits it to the third picture, another radio, which sits next to our ActiveSuite EMB, which is the product we use to take our data and send it to our energy management system. So that's an option if you need to cut in. It works and it's accurate. Lastly, really quick, there's other meters like ultrasonic meters, which basically strap on the pipe and can read flow through the pipe, but we've heard that they potentially could be a little bit less accurate. They weren't necessarily made for reading water. Sometimes air bubbles and residue buildup in the pipe can impact accuracy. Moving on. Next slide, please. Thank you. Really quickly, this is a device that we've been taking a look at lately and doing some analysis on, and we're really thinking about next level water strategies because we've hit 20% savings and the next 20% is going to be much harder. So this is a device we're taking a look to see if it can help us. Basically what it does is a valve that goes on the property side of the meter, and in that middle section there, the compression zone, the valve is able to create smoother flow of water over the water meter, which essentially trues the meter read. So they say you can save between 1% and 3% just by providing a more accurate reading by smoothing that water flow. And then you can get additional savings because there's some capability built into the valve where you can control pressure coming into the building, which could save you more down the line, up to 25%. So we're doing some engineering analysis on this now. We'll see if it all goes well. We'll try to pilot something. Maybe we'll have some exciting news to share and case study material next year. Next slide, please. And I'll just close really fast with green leasing. I won't do too much. It's an awesome program. Green Lease Leaders run by the Institute for Market Transformation and DOE. So if you want to get involved, please look that up and check it out. This is an infographic case study we did in partnership with IMT and the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, highlighting how we use the green lease in our buildings. And it's a really good tool for water. Really, green leasing is what I see it as a foundational sustainability document if you want to engage your commercial office clients or retail clients. And we've even started using it in multifamily as well. Basically, you can get language in your lease that helps you partner with tenants on sustainability instead of pushing them or nagging them to do sustainability. You can create a partnership around it and share, the costs, share the savings of doing sustainability. And we've done this with water. We have clauses in our leases that say when you do a tenant build out, you have to use water sense labeled fixtures when they're available. We have flush and flow rate minimum requirements using third-party standards. And so we call that out in our lease and say you have to do it, and we work with our tenants to do that. And then other things like pushing them to go further and reporting leaks as soon as possible, only running the dishwasher, when it's full, things like that. And it all seems really, really small, but the thing that we've learned with energy is if you do it a little bit at a time and you scale it over the building, it really does make a difference, every small thing. And so that's what we encourage our clients to do, and we work with them to do that. Next slide, please. So that's all I've got, but I just want to say thanks again to the team for putting the webinar here together. It was a great panel. And also just close by saying, we've done a lot of work on water efficiency and water management, but there's still a long way to go. And there's a lot of awesome technologies and ideas out there in the market. You just got to go find them. It's a really exciting area to work in. I'm really excited about it. And we're going to continue to save and do everything we can to do that. So appreciate it. Thanks again. Happy to answer questions later on.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. So a quick reminder to send in any questions you may have through the webinar chat box. We're collecting those and hope to get through as many as we can towards the end. Now we'll head to the Building Owners and Managers Association, where Ken will tell us about a new program that they've launched for owners to reduce water and waste. So Ken, tell us more.
Well, thank you, Cindy. It's a pleasure to be part of this webinar. We are always excited to talk about the W Squared Challenge. Let me also start by saying thank you to you and to the Better Buildings program and its staff for putting together this webinar. And a thank you as well to the previous speakers who you can tell are really doing some great things. Next slide, please. I'll give some background on the challenge, and first off, for those who might not have come across the W Squared Challenge until now, the W2 stands for water and waste. I hope everybody figured that out. This is a sustainability benchmarking program based on the idea that water and waste represent the next frontier in sustainability and where we can really move the industry forward. A few quick words on who we are and who our partners are. BOMA International, BOMA standing for Building Owners and Managers Association. We're the professional association for commercial real estate. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., where I am. But more importantly, we have 88 local associations across the U.S. So there's one near you, and many more affiliates are around the world. BOMA has considered sustainability to be an essential part of our organization, who we are, what we do. We have a long history of programs promoting sustainability generally and benchmarking specifically. We're proud to be 11-time recipients of the Energy Star Partner of the Year Award. Much of this history revolves around energy efficiency. That's an issue where commercial real estate has a track record of progress and leadership. There's still more work to be done, but the impetus for this challenge was a belief that water and waste represent an under-recognized opportunity and the next step forward for industry sustainability efforts. The idea came from BOMA International's Energy and Environment Committee. This challenge could not have reached this point without the support of a number of allies, and that list begins with Yardi. Yardi is a BOMA cornerstone partner and a company that shares BOMA's vision of market transformation through sustainability, and they welcome the opportunity to support the challenge. And essential support was also provided and continues to be provided by the Energy Star program, whose staff not only recognized the potential for this challenge, but fully embraced it, offering resources, assisting in promotion, and more. The challenge provides an opportunity to highlight the water and waste capabilities of Portfolio Manager, and many users are still unaware of those features. And we can also promote the related WaterSense and WasteWise programs. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of the challenge. It's really a simple concept. We should focus on water and waste reduction and get properties to start benchmarking, benchmarking being the gateway to taking further action. In return for committing to enter water and or waste data, at least quarterly in Portfolio Manager, participants receive progress reports, helpful tips, additional resources, recognition opportunities. This is designed, as you see, as a 2-year program that kicked off back on New Year's Day of 2018. Year 1 sets a baseline for your data, and in year 2, we can start to track year-over-year changes and identify areas for improvement. Everything's done in Portfolio Manager. BOMA produces progress reports as well as other resources. And very purposefully, participation is open to anyone. You do not need to be a BOMA member. Your property can be in any building sector. We just want to encourage everyone to participate. Next slide, please. So we think we've made participation in this challenge very, very easy. A lot of benefits, but not a lot of new work for you. Our website is at www.boma.org/W2. There's a very basic sign-up form to get you started, and that's really just to make sure we have your contact information so we can make sure you get our monthly and other communications. Next, you share your buildings with the challenges account and Portfolio Manager, and then you enter your water or waste data at least quarterly. We do hope that you'll participate both on the water and waste side, but it's not required to do both. We know there are sometimes issues related to getting that data. Those are problems that we'd like to help solve. So we'd like everybody to participate at whatever level you can, and then increase your participation in the future as is possible. So we want to get as many properties as possible benchmarking. We did not know what level of interest to expect with this program. Our friends at Energy Star suggested that if 100 buildings sign up, we should consider this a success. Next slide, please. And we have been blown away by the response. The challenge is starting to approach the end of its first year. The participation numbers far surpassed expectations, and we think indicate that the program is really resonating within the industry. More than 2,000 buildings have signed up across the U.S. That represents more than 300 cities that have participants. All building sectors are well represented. And perhaps the most eye-popping metric of all is down on the bottom of the screen and confirms that these participants aren't just making a commitment, but they're following through. More than 400 million square feet of property have been shared with the W Squared Challenge in Portfolio Manager. So thank you if you're a participant. If you're not, you can still join. We hope you will want to be part of this momentum. Next slide, please. So stepping back a little bit, what will this challenge accomplish for the real estate industry? Besides advancing the next generation of sustainability work, The program promotes acceptance of a convenient tool for tracking water and waste that already exists today in Portfolio Manager. And as it progresses, we hope this challenge will show the promise to demonstrate potential cost savings, as well as quantify the impact of voluntary benchmarking. By the conclusion of the challenge, BOMA will identify trends across the industry, will formulate potential policy recommendations. For instance, one area of interest we've already identified is obtaining waste data. Many report having difficulty. Imagine the potential if, as a result of this challenge and thousands of participants, we could go to the industry, to the waste haulers and say, this is what we need. We want to work with you to solve this challenge. And that's just one example. Next slide, please. Beyond the overall perspective for the industry, we think that individual participants are already seeing benefits, and that will only ramp up as we go into the next year. By participating in the benchmarking and receiving progress reports and receiving other resources, participants will better understand their property's water and waste usage and be able to compare performance to their peers. Potentially, you can then decide to expand your sustainability efforts. You can see operating costs reduced. You can earn recognition for the leadership as you deserve. And we're already also having, anecdotally, we're starting to receive stories about some impressive reductions. So it's a reminder that the active benchmarking plus a walkthrough or an audit is an incredibly valuable tool and something we want everybody to think about. Resource development will accelerate in year 2. We're going to soon unveil a water and waste management playbook with a checklist of recommendations on best practices. We'll also be ramping up a regular webinar series on our end and also be putting a lot of new resources on our webpage. Next slide, please. Getting back to being recognized for participation, this is a participant logo, and we encourage all of our participants to use this and to use it as widely as you want. It's helpful for the visibility of the challenge, but it's also about getting you the recognition you deserve for making this commitment to participate. There will be additional opportunities for recognition, especially as we begin to see success stories that we can turn into case studies and good examples. And we will constantly be looking for ways to promote these participants, including recognition in publications and at conferences. Next slide, please. And I will end it there, so we still have some time for questions. Again, for more information, please just head to our website. As a reminder, again, even though we're underway, you can still participate. We want you to join the 2,000 plus properties that have signed up. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues to join. It takes just a few seconds to complete the sign-up form on the website. We're very excited about the progress already, and we expect a lot more from this program. I'd be happy to answer any questions either now or please follow up with me afterward. But thanks again to the Better Buildings program for the great work that they do, not only today, but thank you for joining the webinar, and I'll turn this back over to Cindy.
Thanks, Ken. So we encourage everyone on the webinar today to check out BOMA's W2 website, sign up for the challenge. We've also got some additional resources on this slide that you'll receive. You'll find links to tower companies' case studies on energy and water data management, and there's also more information on some critical water metering infrastructure, as well as the EPA's WaterSense program. So next slide, let's go ahead and get to some questions from the audience. So I think I'll kick it off with Rock. So we have a question about ARC SCORU and whether it is being used to benchmark water. So Rock, why don't you tell us what ARC SCORU is and what you think about that question?
Yeah, I think this is a great question to see in something like this. So they're clearly participating in the industry and aware of a lot of the programs that are out there. So ARC SCORU is the latest platform for LEED. It's really, think of ARC SCORU as the LEED Online for the LEED program. And it primarily uses the LEED v4.1 rating system. It's kind of a add on to what LEED V4 is. So it kind of just takes a lot of the effort away from the initial building documentation and really starts to focus on the performance of the buildings. It can be used for new construction as well, though. So new construction, existing buildings, all the way from like office, multifamily, hospitals, any type of building can be entered into the program as well. As for this, the specific question here, being and using that platform to benchmark water, it certainly could. It could definitely go that direction. They certainly have the capabilities and the data to study and to analyze, to put together a pretty comprehensive water benchmark on a like the standard 1 to 100 rating system of sorts. If you're familiar with LEED, they love their rating systems and their scoring metrics. So what would need to be done, though, for it to be practically used is some more transparency to how they currently calculate the water. It's using buildings that are entered and participating in that platform. It does cost money to participate. We do have certain, promo codes depending on, what we want to get in, just to kind of share the information and to get people using it and understanding what it really is. But it can certainly go that direction for benchmarking water. But for now, use Portfolio Manager, use the BOMA W2 to start collecting your data and building from there.
Great, thanks. So we've got several questions for Jonathan and tower companies about how they've benchmarked water and how they've sort of looked at their data. So I'm going to ask you these 3 questions and then ask you to sort of respond maybe cohesively. So we've got a question about how our water use is benchmarked and if there is a source for WUI, so water use intensity. And then we've got a question about how what's the interval for this monitoring of the water? So by minute, by hours, by days. And then if you can also talk a little bit about the cost associated with some of the water savings equipment that Tower has implemented.
Sure. All right, I'll start with the benchmarking. So we originally and still primarily use EPA Portfolio Manager as the tool to benchmark, which is monthly data. And then there's a source, and you can use that as your source for WUI. But again, I'll just push you, if you are a owner or manager or industry representative, to use Better Buildings Challenge, because they work with you very closely using Portfolio Manager as the platform to look at that data, analyze it, and then, annually report out on it and work towards a savings goal. That would be my best advice there. Interval, so for, again, I mentioned monthly on Portfolio Manager, that's primarily what you'll see. But like Rock said, some bills come quarterly, so that can be an issue. But for us, for our real-time water monitoring program, we have the ability to go down to, I think, 5 minutes, or even more than that, I think, even more granular. But we've found so far that with water, that's not very valuable. The data you get and the visualization you get out of that is not actionable or as useful. So we tend to look at it by hour. Just the way the graph and the curve looks when you look at it by hour is a little bit easier. And then cost, so that's a kind of general broad question, so it's a little tough to answer because it just depends on what you're looking at. But again, I mentioned some of these things are cost zero, right? Basically, if you have a system and you're monitoring water, or you do some work to just find operational things with your engineers to go in and dig in and find some stuff, you can make some small tweaks or things that you never would have imagined just by doing night audits or day audits, depending on your facility, and finding things. But then it can go anywhere from a couple $100 to getting a very basic meter that connects to your utility meter, up to as high as you want to go, depending on your facility and size, to do other things. But for example, that flow device that I was talking about could range up to $10,000, but the savings come back usually within a year if you have the right facility. So it's a big range. It all depends on what you're looking to do.
Thanks. This question is for Rock. Someone asked, do you have any ideas for getting sewer charges metered instead of on a per unit basis?
For the sewer charges, I mean, depending on your local municipality or your water utility and what you may have as far as building equipment, there's an opportunity for evaporation credits. So basically just a reduction in your sewer charge. What you would need on there, and it's primarily connected with like cooling tower usage. So you'd need a makeup meter on your water going into your cooling tower and a meter on your blowdown or bleed meter. So the water being discharged from your cooling tower, basic simple subtraction from what's going in to what's coming out. If there's whatever that difference is, would be essentially what is evaporated. And then you could potentially get some credit back or dollars back for showing that that water indeed did not go down the sewer. Unfortunately, there's still not a lot available for sewer charges, widely. It's very common in the south with cooling towers down there and the higher evaporation rates there. So again, talk to your local utility and see what options that they may have.
Okay, great. This question is going back to Jonathan. The attendee says fixture maintenance and repair along with system monitoring is low-hanging fruit. In their experience, getting tenant occupants and contractors to join the efforts are the most difficult. So what was Tower's approach to getting personal on the same page to help conserve water?
I'm glad someone asked this question because I agree there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in the monitoring and things like that, and the tenant engagement and vendor engagement really is tricky and hard to do long-term consistently, so I would agree with you. So what we do a lot of different things. We will run internal challenges at our buildings and give them, tips and things to do during like Earth Month or other kind of environmental holidays, and push them to save water, and we'll give them a little prize for doing that and getting involved and going on social media and sharing with their friends and things like that. So that's one way we do it at the residential level. In our office buildings, we'll do a lot of lunch and learns with our clients, and we'll come in and we'll educate about water. We'll talk about our green lease and the clauses in there and what that means and how they can save water, reduce waste and things like that. And during those lunch and learns, we don't just meet with the tenants. We also bring in our vendors. So whatever the applicable vendor would be for what we're talking about, if it's the cleaning crew, for example, which is usually a big one, we'll bring them in and the managers from those companies in to sit down with the clients at the same time and get that education and talk to them about how we can work with them to save energy, save water, reduce waste, things like that. So yeah, it is tricky to do, but it really does require kind of a consistent effort. Education is always number one. But yeah, it's tough stuff.
I think we have time for one more question. This one is for Ken. Someone asked about whether the W2 W Squared Challenge, since it's a 2-year effort, whether it's a pilot or if there is plans to continue moving forward.
Sure, that's a good question, really an insightful question, because in some ways we know that 2 years for some people will sound like a long time for a challenge like this, but in other ways, when you're looking at long-term sustainability efforts, when you're looking at year-over-year progress, in that regard, 2 years is not very long. So we haven't necessarily figured out what the next step is. We're trying not to have any preconceived notions, but we do know this is really just a launching point. We know we're going to end up with policy recommendations. We're going to end up with best practices. And then what do we do with them? Maybe they relate to our BOMA 360 program that I hope people are familiar with. Maybe we decide we want to continue the W Squared Challenge as is in future years. But it is fair to say this is the first step. And again, if you haven't joined, please do. You can join anytime, which is a little different from a lot of competitions. We're not really emphasizing the competition part. We will recognize some of the best examples. We will recognize some of our long-term original participants, but we want everybody to join in, and in 2 years we'll figure out where that next step leads.
All right. So let's go to the next slide to wrap it up. So topics for our Better Buildings webinars are set for the rest of the year. You can register through the link provided online. If any of these topics really call out to you and you feel like you have a good story to share, please reach out to your Better Buildings account managers and let us know. Next slide. Our next webinar in November will be called Bright Idea, Lighting Toolkit for K-12 School Districts. It'll be held November 6th, 2018 from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Next slide. With that, I'd like to thank our panelists very much for taking the time to be with us today. Feel free to contact our presenters directly with additional questions, or if we weren't able to get to your question during the Q&A period, if you'd like to learn more about the Better Buildings program, please check out our website or feel free to contact me, Cindy Zhu, directly at the email shown. I encourage you to follow the Better Buildings Initiative on Twitter for all the latest. You'll be receiving an email notice when the archive of this session is available online. Thank you, everyone.